I want to tell you about my pal Frank Miller. Last year, he took one of the most deeply established icons, Batman, and he did The Dark Knight Returns. It revolutionizes comic art, and it revolutionizes the way we think about comic books. This is Frank Miller. He's hot. You better take a look at him.
The Dark Knight Returns changed everything. Released in early 1986, this 4-part epic saw writer-artist Frank Miller revolutionize Batman, telling a dystopian tale of an elderly Bruce Wayne forced to don the cape and cowl again to save a world on the brink of collapse. Miller's bold reimagining of the Caped Crusader immediately became a sensation. It shed the last remaining vestiges of Batman's Silver Age camp and fully embraced the hero's gritty origins, while also telling a sweeping blockbuster story that dropped Bruce Wayne into the height of the Cold War and contemporary America. This comic is legendary. It created a new precedent for modern Batman stories and established Frank Miller as an era-defining writer. And with February 2026 celebrating 40 years since Dark Knight's debut issue was released, I want to examine why it's still regarded as the quintessential Batman comic, examine its legacy, and even speak to a few special guests to get their thoughts and memories on the book. So in this video, I want to explain the history of The Dark Knight Returns, discuss how it came to be, and how Frank Miller redefined the Caped Crusader, as well as how this 4-part epic changed the entire future of superhero comics. Before we continue though, just a quick reminder to leave a like on this video if you enjoy it, and subscribe to Owen Likes Comics so you don't miss out on any future videos. If you want to understand The Dark Knight Returns and its impact, you first have to understand its writer, Frank Miller. Miller's comic career began in the late 1970s, when at the age of just 19, he moved to New York City from Vermont and began freelancing as a fill-in and cover artist for Marvel. In February of 1979 though, he illustrated 2 issues of Spectacular Spider-Man that saw Peter Parker team up with Daredevil. Having impressed those at Marvel with his work, Miller was selected as the new ongoing Daredevil artist in May. Initially working with writer Roger McKenzie, he began a near 5-year run on the series. During his tenure as both artist and later writer, Miller revitalized the Horned Hero and evolved his series into one of Marvel's most celebrated comics. During this run, Miller brought a noticeably grittier crime noir edge to Matt Murdock's adventures, focusing extensively on Daredevil's battles with organized crime, introducing the then underutilized Spider-Man villain of the Kingpin as his main antagonist, alongside elements of martial arts, creating the villainous ninja clan of the Hand, as well as Matt's former love-turned-assassin, Elektra. By the time Miller first left Daredevil in 1983, he had become a rising star within the industry. It was also during this period that Miller and Steve Gerber pitched a trilogy of books to DC called Metropolis, designed to introduce brand new versions of Batman, Superman and Wonder Woman in the aftermath of Crisis on Infinite Earths. Although this pitch was rejected, DC Vice President Dick Giordano hired Miller to write and draw a 4-issue miniseries that would revitalize the Caped Crusader, as Batman sales had begun to stagnate, reaching a record low of 75,000 copies per month in 1985. Miller proposed an alternate universe tale that focused on a retired Bruce Wayne, returning to save a dystopian world from gang violence and authoritarianism. Even though Batman's comics had throughout the 1970s and early 80s began to move away from the hero's light-hearted and more fantastical stories of the Silver Age, thanks to the work of writers like Denny O'Neil, Jerry Conway and Doug Mensch, Miller intended for this series to be Batman's darkest tale in years, and fully restore the brooding pulp hero of the 1930s that was created by Bill Finger and Bob Kane. With this concept in mind, Miller teamed with frequent collaborator and inker Klaus Janson and his colorist and then partner Lynn Varley to bring this unique vision of the Caped Crusader to life. While the book would be set in the present day, it would introduce an older, grizzled and more jaded version of Bruce Wayne, who gave up being Batman a decade ago. Inspired by films like Dirty Harry, contemporary contemporary American politics and the Cold War, and Miller's own experiences of living in Hell's Kitchen, Miller crafted a version of Batman that had a distinct edge to him, a lone gunslinger returning to battle to save the world one final time. Miller explained this ground-up reinvention during a March 1986 interview with Rolling Stone magazine, stating that,
"I have completely reworked Batman for the needs of the modern world, though in a way he's not so different than the man he started out as in 1938. Batman only makes sense as a response to the world being basically a screwed up place, where all the wrong people are in charge and justice is not served. I think that lines up perfectly with our sense of the world at present."
Miller's disillusionment with the contemporary world and the increasingly darker trends seen in popular media fueled the writer's radical reinvention of the Caped Crusader. Much like how Batman always saved the day during Miller's childhood, having grown up watching the 1960s TV show, he aimed to bring this guardian of justice into the present day, introducing a Batman tailor-made for the modern problems and able to fight against injustice, gang violence, and authoritarianism. And in February of 1986, the first installment of this exciting new series would be released. With its now iconic cover of Batman leaping into action as lightning strikes behind him, it was immediately clear to any prospective readers that this was going to be something special. Each issue of The Dark Knight Returns tells its own standalone tale, chronicling Batman's journey from a jaded lone vigilante to a full-fledged revolutionary reaching mythic status. As such, I want to discuss each entry in this 4-part series, highlight the main themes of every issue, and explain how Miller uses them to build his new iteration of Batman. Issue 1 introduces us to a now 55-year-old Bruce Wayne, living in a Gotham City that has descended into lawlessness and violence. Bruce is haunted by his subconscious, which urges him to come out of retirement and fix this broken world. After being in a car wreck and held at knife point by a gang, Bruce experiences a flashback of his parents' death while watching TV, before a bat crashes through the window and Batman is reborn. Donning his classic blue and grey costume, Batman announces his return in dramatic fashion. Meanwhile, a seemingly rehabilitated Harvey Dent is released from Arkham and starts plotting a terror attack in the city. Bruce is forced to stop Harvey's plans and ultimately confronts his former friend, where Dent removes his bandages and reveals that although his face was fixed while in Arkham, he sees himself as more scarred than ever before. While Batman initially sees the face of his former friend, he looks again and sees a bat staring at him, realizing that much like Two-Face, he's also driven by duality and obsession. As Batman disappears into the night and several TV news anchors debate the hero's return, we're also reintroduced to the Joker, now a catatonic inmate within Arkham who catches a glimpse of his arch enemy and smiles. Miller's opening issue is a masterclass in storytelling and world building. From its opening page, we learn so much about the world that this version of Batman inhabits, his inner conflicts and emotions, and the external forces that drive his resurrection. Bruce's fiery introduction reveals the character's death wish, with his return to crime fighting depicted as being either a means to finally achieve inner peace or receive the soldier's death that he always expected. Throughout the comic, Bruce is tormented by his past, as demonstrated by the Robin costume in the cave, revealing how the death of Jason Todd caused his exile. And even upon his return, he's a man wholly driven by duality. Although each issue in this story has its own primary antagonist, the use of Two-Face here furthers Miller's exploration of identity, with Harvey's broken psyche and inability to find a place in the modern world mirroring Bruce's own struggles to let go of who he is. In the end, neither man can let go of their past and return to who the world expects them to be. And while for Harvey this results in evil and chaos, for Bruce, being Batman and restoring order to a lawless world is the character's ultimate purpose. With that said though, Batman's return is also viewed by Miller as the continuation of a vicious cycle. Much like Two-Face, Bruce only finds sanity by returning to his self-destructive tendencies, framing Batman's crusade to save this broken world as a martyr essentially trapping himself in hell in order to save the next generation from having to make the same mistakes. The notion of Batman's mission shaping the next generation is expanded upon in issue 2, subtitled The Dark Knight Triumphant. Here we're introduced to Carrie Kelly, a teenager inspired by Batman who adopts the identity of Robin. Carrie watches Bruce waging a war with the mutant gang and ultimately confronting its monstrous leader. Batman is soundly defeated in the fight though, and only saved from certain death by Robin's timely intervention. After returning to the cave, Bruce thanks Carrie and adopts her as his sidekick. Once fully healed and with the dynamic duo officially reunited, Batman returns to the mutant gang's lair and fights its leader again. This time, Bruce surgically takes down his foe in a mud pit, choking him unconscious and rallying the gang members to instead join his cause. As Batman begins to build his army, TV news debates the hero's return and increasingly violent methods, as newly appointed Commissioner Ellen Yindel orders a citywide manhunt against the Dark Knight in his brand of vigilante justice. If issue 1 was all about Batman versus identity, this entry pits the hero against society, considering how Batman's resurgence impacts the wider world around him. Miller primarily showcases this through the introduction of Carrie Kelly, who joins his crusade as Robin and symbolises hope for the future. For a story as grim and gritty as Dark Knight, Carrie's appearance provides a much needed sense of hope, optimism and levity, both for the story itself and for Bruce's worldview and personality. Miller's Batman is a jaded cynic, but Robin's unexpected arrival in his life restores a sense of wonder and playfulness that's mostly associated with the Batman of the Silver Age and the 1960s TV show. Carrie also exists to showcase how the Dark Knight's resurgence inspires the disillusioned youth of Gotham City, with her unwavering faith in Bruce's mission being paralleled by the mutant gang and their leader. Much like Carrie, the mutant gang are almost exclusively teenagers, enacting violence and crimes with no clear purpose or philosophy at the behest of their hulking leader. Their actions seemingly have no mission statement and simply are just rebelling against a system that's disenfranchised them. But when Batman defeats the mutant leader and encourages the gang to instead join his fight, they find a newfound purpose and direction as the Sons of Batman. Through this, issue 2 sees the Dark Knight evolve from a bitter lone gunslinger to something of a paternal figure and a revolutionary leader, with the sheer idea of Batman evolving into a rallying cry for the city's young and downtrodden, themes that will only become more prevalent in later issues. Through taking down the mutant gang and amassing his army, Batman also catches the ire of the status quo, symbolised in this issue by the GCPD and Commissioner Yindel, but will also include Superman, President Reagan and the US government. By framing Bruce's crusade to restore law and order against these figures, Miller frames the hero as both anti-establishment and a populist, with the idea of a rebellious Batman finding renewed purpose in this war against the status quo, pushing the comic into a more operatic, epic and political direction in its next 2 issues. Before we continue though, I want to take a second and talk to you about something I should probably promote more often, patreon.com/Owen Likes Comics. I've been working on this channel full time for a little while now. It's my absolute dream job and I love it, and it wouldn't be possible without everyone who watches, subscribes, likes and comments, as well as all of my supporters over on Patreon. In case you didn't know, I release several bonus videos and podcasts every month on my Patreon, as well as the full uncut conversations with special guests that I record as part of these videos. Right now, you can watch an exclusive video where I rank all the upcoming Marvel and DC films and shows of 2026, and extended versions of my interviews with Matt Fraction, Chip Zdarsky and Grant Morrison, where we chat all things The Dark Knight Returns. You can also watch all of my videos ad-free and several days early, and be part of a community of like-minded people where we regularly chat about comics, movies and everything else. There are multiple different tiers with unique perks starting at just $1 per month. I will leave links in the video description and the pinned comment, or just go to patreon.com/Owen Likes Comics. At the very least, check it out and see if it's something you'd be interested in. Thank you for all of your support, and let's get back to the video. Issue 3, titled Hunt the Dark Knight, reintroduces the Joker, having orchestrated his escape from Arkham and manipulated his psychiatrist to book him for a late-night TV show. The Clown Prince of Crime plots his own deadly comeback. Batman and Robin, suspicious of the claims that Joker's insanity has been cured, while evading the GCPD manhunt. Meanwhile, we're also reintroduced to Superman, who now works as a covert agent of the US government in the Cold War. Clark meets with Bruce and warns him that the White House is following his actions in Gotham, fearing fearing that he may be ordered to take down his longtime friend. Although Superman asks Bruce to maintain a low profile, he and Robin break into the TV studio where Joker makes his theatrical return. After Bruce finds a captured and beaten Catwoman, Joker kills the talk show host and unleashes a bloody crime wave throughout the city. Batman eventually chases Joker down to an abandoned amusement park, coming face to face in the Tunnel of Love. Driven with rage, Bruce realizes he may have to take drastic action to end their never-ending war, and consumed by rage, attempts to snap the Joker's neck. However, Batman can't bring himself to take the villain's life, and the two longtime foes collapse next to each other within the tunnel. As they sit there, Joker begins to laugh and offers Batman one final punchline, snapping his own injured neck and framing the hero for murder. This issue focuses heavily on Batman vs. trauma, told mainly through the hero's relationship with the Joker. Miller's portrayal of the Clown Prince of Crime is a noticeably darker, more sinister version than many contemporary readers were used to. Although comics of the late 70s and early 80s had restored the Joker's more deadly roots, Miller's take amplifies every trait of the character to its absolute maximum, from his sadism and penchant for violence to his master manipulation and pathological obsession with the Dark Knight. Whereas the previous issue focused on Batman's relationship with the next generation, this installment forces Bruce to confront his past. Similar to his interaction with Two-Face, Joker symbolizes the world that Bruce Wayne tried to leave behind, and mirrors the character's obsession and inability to let go of who he is. In the same way that Bruce's dormant spirit awakens in issue 1 and subconsciously urges him to become Batman again, Joker's catatonic state is broken by his arch enemy's return, with the villain once again finding his purpose through Batman. This in turn leads to the cycle of violence starting all over again, with Joker now making up for lost time, so much so that Bruce is forced to consider whether to take the villain's life. The climactic showdown in the Tunnel of Love is rightfully one of the Dark Knight Returns' most iconic moments, and a brutal distillation of the cat and mouse games these characters have been trapped in since 1939. Even when Batman, in a moment of weakness, does try and kill the Joker though, he still can't bring himself to do it. For as dark and grim as this world is, and for how much Miller paints Batman as a morally grey and jaded figure, there still remains a line that the Dark Knight won't cross, despite the years of pain and anguish that Joker has caused to Gotham and its inhabitants. It's a powerful moment and one crucial to Batman's journey, only slightly undermined by the hero's frequent use of guns throughout the book. Nevertheless though, similar to how Batman only feels fully reborn once Robin joins him at his side, the Joker serves as the other side of that coin, the living embodiment of his never-ending war against evil, who even in death is never truly defeated. In the end, regardless of whether he kills the Joker or not, the Dark Knight falls by the end of this issue, and with the walls quickly closing in around him, there remains one final act of heroism and defiance for Batman to perform in order to evolve from a man to a myth. With the third issue concluding with the Joker's death and Batman being framed for murder, the fourth and final installment, subtitled The Dark Knight Falls, begins with Bruce and Carrie fleeing the amusement park. Meanwhile, Superman intercepts a Soviet missile and the blast plunges much of America into a blackout. Riots break out across the country, with the Caped Crusader rallying the former mutant gang, now rechristened as the Sons of Batman, to help protect Gotham's innocent and restore law and order. After Batman maintains peace in Gotham, President Reagan instructs Superman to take the Dark Knight down. The pair eventually come face to face in Crime Alley, with Batman wearing a powerful exosuit and wielding several Kryptonian devices, and the two best friends engage in a violent fight. Batman defeats Clark and the regime that he's become a part of. He declares himself the one man who beat you, before Bruce suddenly suffers a heart attack, collapsing into Superman's arms. The final pages depict the hero's funeral outside the now destroyed Wayne Manor. Clark, attending the ceremony as his civilian alter ego, shares a glance with Carrie Kelly as he hears a faint heartbeat in the distance. Meanwhile, underground, an alive Bruce reunites with his proteges, having killed off his civilian identity to become more than a man, a legend that can inspire the next generation. He declares that while his mission is never over, this will be a good life. Issue 4 is a comic defined by Batman's relationship with authority. Throughout the series, not only is the Dark Knight caught the ire of the GCPD, but the looming threat of the White House also hovers over Bruce's crusade. Miller grounds the entire story in contemporary American politics by depicting Batman's revival against the backdrop of the Cold War and ongoing social unrest throughout the presidency of Ronald Reagan. With disenchantment growing across the country and the threat of nuclear war becoming increasingly plausible, Miller's Batman Batman takes the form of a pseudo-revolutionary, leading his army into battle in an epic war against the system and those who represent it. Superman serves as the physical manifestation of the government in this sense. While I don't love this portrayal of the character as a long-time Superman fan, he serves as the perfect antagonist for this climactic issue. During each installment of the story, Batman's mission has grown larger in scale. What started off as a gritty neo-noir drama evolves into a high-stakes operatic blockbuster, as Batman's costume evolves from blue and grey cloth to a hulking armour and faces down against the Man of Tomorrow. If the opening issue depicts how Bruce Wayne learns to transform from a man to a hero, this issue chronicles Batman's evolution into a legend, a folklore figure that inspires others to fight injustice long after he's gone. The final page displaying Bruce surrounded by his young followers signifies this, whereas the opening page of issue 1 depicts an aimless, restless Bruce with a death wish. His ending shows him as a man content, having finally found his place in the world and now part of a cause that will live beyond himself. Above all else, The Dark Knight Returns is Frank Miller's love letter to Batman, and a bold new chapter that evolves the hero into mythic status. It's a celebration of everything from the hero's noir and pulp roots to his Silver Age pomp, and creating a new version of the Caped Crusader tailor-made for the contemporary world he was born into, affirming that a better future is possible through conviction, integrity, and action. When it was released throughout the first half of 1986, The Dark Knight Returns was a revelation. Throughout each of these 4 48-page epics, Frank Miller and his collaborators not only changed Batman forever, but changed the very idea of what comics could be. It's not an understatement to say that The Dark Knight Returns is one of the most influential stories ever told by DC, and a comic that continues to shape how superhero stories are told to this day. When considering the book's legacy though, and its everlasting impact on the Batman character, I wanted to get some expert opinions. So I sat down with 3 of my favourite comic book writers who have all worked on celebrated Batman titles to discuss their earliest memories of The Dark Knight Returns and how it shaped and informed their takes on the hero in later years.
Yeah, there was a book that I saw in my local comic shop. I was buying standard Marvel stuff, a bit of DC, but there was this leather-bound book called The Complete Frank Miller. It had Dark Knight Returns and Batman Year One in it. So I got both of those at the same time. Like Christmas Day, I sat down and basically read Batman Year One and then Dark Knight Returns. I think at the time, Dark Knight Returns blew my mind more than Year One. Just such an impactful story. It was also, you grow up reading Marvel books like superheroes fight superheroes, and it's no big deal because it's always just like a misunderstanding, and then they rectify it, and then they move on. And the Batman Superman stuff in this, there's such a wild buildup towards that final issue. And that fight is not a fight of misunderstanding. It is a fight of values and principles. Batman Year One, there's nothing Batman does in that story that couldn't conceivably be done by a person. Whereas in, Dark Knight Returns, it's like him with that rifle and like the helicopter, it's all big, giant superhero stuff, but also, tempered with this is an old man. So there's the humanity there, the fact that like he can't quite do the things he used to do, even though they are amazing. Batman Year One is him basically every time he fucks up, he's just like lucky amateur, lucky. And as the old man, he's just like lucky old man. Like they're both just kind of like trying to project a thing that they're not. One is he's not yet, and one is he's not anymore. The wild thing about reading Batman Year One and Dark Knight Returns kind of back to back as a young man is it really showed me that you could do so many different things with comics, especially in the art and the storytelling. Like those wild grid pages that Miller did was just mind-blowing. Like it really was and even the stylistic changes. Like I wasn't used to seeing different styles. Like everything kind of felt at the time, just like an extension of Neil Adams. To see people taking big swings and like telling these amazing stories that were also self-contained. Like that's the other thing. Like DC is so good at having projects that have a beginning, middle, and an end, and are tight and condensed. I mean, and Miller in that period banged out, 3 of them for the companies, like Born Again, Year One, and Dark Knight Returns. And as a result, they sell forever. And you'll never see a run like that again because since that point, everyone's just kind of really interrogated superheroes and dug in and tried to come up with like new ways of telling these stories, and like it's harder to find a new angle of something that's going to hit really big when frankly like Miller did so much of it just across like just a few titles.
Literally the first time I went to a direct market comic shop, the first time I discovered direct market comic shops, that there were stores that sold nothing but comic books. Four was on the stand, and I didn't know anything about it. You know, I bought comics that I found interesting that I thought looked cool off of spinner racks at drugstores or whatever, grocery stores, and that cover was so apocalyptically amazing, and just the Lynn Varley's color sold me on that, and everything else kind of came after. I just bought stuff that looked cool. And this just editorially, there's things that influence me in the way that like I cut film that I can trace back to this book. You know, it's astonishingly inventive even today. You know, and I go back and I look through it, and it's I love Ronin for the messiness. You know, I think Ronin is a lot of fun because it has the feeling of this kid has just stolen a car and he's seeing how fast it can go. This feels like someone who knows how fast the car can go and knows what he can do with it. Part of the formal audacity, the density of this book is a young man's game, right? Frank never worked this densely again, and never would. It's you know, every page is 3 pages. A fucking 16 panel grid is astonishing. And to be rigid about it and to understand how it works and how it ebbs and how it flows, and like just down to the page flips, you know, it's a guy who knows he's got complete control over the package and such trust in the collaborators. I you know, I don't think there's an edition of this book I haven't owned. That's my kind of my favorite editions, is that artist edition, is just because you can really get granular at how the choices were made. The cropping, the compositioning, how he uses tangents. You know, it's a great example of breaking all the rules, because you know the rules you can break, and you know artists are warned against tangents all the time. This book lives and dies by tangents, panel to panel, but he knows what he's doing. It's not accidental, it's deliberate, you know, and it's had an impact on every book I've done in some form or fashion. Down to, you know, I do the little blurb balloons, that like is just baked into my, like I don't even recognize that as a thing that I do consciously. Like it's so baked into what I do and how I work. It casts a shadow over everything, and it's certainly me being in the right time in the right place, but that my first exposure to this era of comics explicitly produced for older, more sophisticated, I'm hesitant to use the word mature, audiences, was this. Is just, yeah, it's like I said, it's a crease in the tablecloth that is never going to get ironed out.
I loved it. I think most people did at the time. You know, it was such a blast of novelty. You know, and there had been clever comics before. That's where we all came from. As you know, there was all that stuff in the 70s. So there was a lot of really great, sophisticated and beautifully written comics that appealed to older teenagers and even to younger adults, I would think. But there'd been a long period where it was just kind of really meat and potatoes stuff, you know, late 70s into the early 80s, with a few great flashes. You know, there was Frank Miller's Daredevil there, but I wasn't reading comics at all. I just stopped reading them around about 1978 and didn't pick them up again until Warrior magazine came out. But yeah, Dark Knight was just, it blew everyone away, because at the time what it was the Adam West Batman growing up. There wasn't any other Batman. What it was Adam West growing up. So it had that wide appeal, and when the first time you see him in the suit, he's got the blue and he's got the circle, and the suit changes in every issue. But the first time you see him, it's clearly Adam West, but he's old. My take on Dark Knight Returns is people for years have talked about it was the kind of harbinger of realistic superheroes. I don't think it is at all. Watchmen kind of goes there, but Dark Knight is operatic to me. Dark Knight it's huge. It's on a huge canvas, on a huge stage, and it gets bigger with every issue. The stakes get bigger. Batman's equipment gets bigger. He gets bulkier. His suit gets darker. And to me, what it is it's like a grand opera. It's a huge, like, yeah, I can imagine it on stage almost, you know, like a kind of like a Faust or something. It's that kind of thing. So to me, approaching it as, oh, here's where realism came into comics, or here's grim and gritty. No, it's not that at all. It's something that's like you would see it on a gigantic stage and the most incredible performance with flats moving and buildings changing and carriages going across the stage. That's what Dark Knight feels like to me. It's balletic, it's operatic, it's so beautifully composed as well. And the rhythms of it are so strict and so controlled. There's nothing to me that's wild or untamed about Dark Knight. It's a very coherent statement. Even the way it's laid out. Look at Watchmen's got the 9-panel grid, which comes from Ditko, and it gives you a kind of gag strip rhythm, because you can set up and then, reaction, then punchline. And the thing about Dark Knight is this is multiple panels, 16 panels per page sometimes. And what I loved about it and what influenced me a lot, and Miller does this in Elektra and in other stuff, is that he's using video techniques. It's not film, which is great, because right up until that point, comics as film had been basically Will Eisner doing Orson Welles, and it was Citizen Kane. It's like, how can we copy the angles in Citizen Kane? How can we create these noir effects? And suddenly Miller came along and it was like, nah, never mind films from the 1940s. I'm going to use MTV style editing techniques, and I'm going to use multiple images, and I'm going to create a different dynamic from a typical comic panel by showing you multiple fractions of time. And it was that, I think that was probably influenced by manga, but that's one of the big things that, to me, people don't talk about enough with Dark Knight as well. It's like a video. It's like MTV. It's the first comic to be inspired by video techniques rather than film techniques.
The Dark Knight Returns was met with critical and commercial success upon its release. The 4-issue series became one of the best-selling comics of 1986, with DC printing over 1 million copies and selling it at the marked-up price of $2.95, and received praise from fans and critics for its distinct dark noir version of Batman. The book's success helped usher in a brand new era for the Caped Crusader. Although Batman's comics had gradually trended darker throughout the 80s, Miller's dystopian epic established this version of the hero in the public consciousness. If general audiences had still thought of Batman as Adam West up until this point, now he was firmly a brooding, morally complex vigilante, waging a one-man crusade against an unjust world. Frank Miller would quickly build on Dark Knight's success the following year, teaming with artist David Mazzucchelli for Batman Year One. Told throughout Batman issues 404 to 407, this story retold Bruce Wayne's origin for the new post-crisis DC continuity, showcasing everything from the death of his parents to his first encounters with Jim Gordon, Selina Kyle, and Gotham's criminal underworld. Year One is a fascinating companion piece to The Dark Knight Returns. Whereas Miller's original tale is high concept, bombastic, and operatic, Year One is quiet, subtle, and grounded. Together, they form not only two of Batman's definitive modern comics, but an excellent companion piece to one another, with Year One showcasing Bruce's evolution into a symbol, and Dark Knight demonstrating how a symbol becomes a legend. With that said though, Miller wasn't the only writer keen to capitalise on the acclaim that Dark Knight Returns received. In the years following its release, numerous other creators would try and put their own spin on Batman, telling increasingly dark and mature tales that sought to deconstruct the character. Perhaps the best example of this is The Killing Joke, published in 1988, written by Alan Moore with art by Brian Bolland, which aimed to tell the definitive Batman Joker story and saw the Clown Prince of Crime paralyse Barbara Gordon. Likewise, Jim Starlin, who took over the main Batman series in 1987, also sought to break Batman down in shocking fashion with The Cult, a 4-issue miniseries he penned alongside artist Bernie Wrightson, in which the Dark Knight is kidnapped and tortured by a sinister underground group led by Deacon Blackfire. In 1989, Starlin also wrote A Death in the Family, building off Miller's dark possible future and telling the canonical death of Jason Todd, the second Robin. As such, by the time that the 1990s began, Batman had fully embraced his presence within the darker corner of superhero storytelling, with The Dark Knight Returns serving as the cornerstone of the character's modern era. This is even reflected in the hero's adaptations, with Tim Burton's live-action Batman film releasing only 3 years after Miller's series, and drawing heavy inspiration from both it and The Killing Joke for its tone, visual language, and handling of the Caped Crusader. Even even more recent live-action adaptations still show noticeable influence from the work of Frank Miller, with directors like Christopher Nolan, Zack Snyder, and Matt Reeves adapting key ideas and moments from both Dark Knight and Year One. Despite it now being some 40 years since this series hit shelves, The Dark Knight Returns still looms large over our understanding of Batman and how contemporary writers seek to examine this long-standing hero. Currently, the biggest success story in mainstream comics is Absolute Batman, the new ongoing series launched in late 2024 by Scott Snyder and Nick Dragotta. Published as part of DC's new Absolute universe, this title reimagines Bruce Wayne as a 20-something engineer from Gotham's poorest region and focuses on a rebellious anti-establishment Batman fighting against the corrupt elite. Absolute Batman has been a monumental success since its inception, capturing the attention of both regular comic readers and casual audiences. Its themes of Batman as a symbol of resistance in a cynical world, battling evil billionaires, corrupt politicians, and those who work for them have clearly resonated with a lot of people. Absolute Batman is also, in my opinion, a comic defined by its relationship with The Dark Knight Returns. I've personally been a huge fan of this book since it began, and one of my favourite things about it is how Snyder has interrogated the themes, ideas, and iconography of Frank Miller's original story and reworked them for a new generation. In many ways, Absolute feels like the 21st century's answer to Dark Knight, taking the concept of Batman as a symbol of resistance and reframing these through the problems and anxieties that dominate life in the 2020s. This is aided by the work of Nick Dragotta and colorist Frank Martin, whose depiction of Bruce Wayne owes many notable similarities to Miller's hulking hero, and the comic's use of layout and TV news as a narrative device also feels reminiscent of Miller's approach in The Dark Knight Returns. The fact that Absolute Batman has been so well received speaks to not only the incredible work that the creative team have done, crafting a new iteration of Batman that speaks to modern audiences, but also in how the ideas that drive The Dark Knight Returns remain as relevant now as they did back in the mid-1980s. More so than anything else, Dark Knight was a shock to the system. Much like its iconic cover, depicting Batman leaping into the night sky accompanied by a single crack of lightning, this story changed the very idea of what superhero comics could be. It established a new precedent for Batman that writers, filmmakers, and fans are still grappling with to this day. And so, with 2026 marking its 40th anniversary, I encourage everyone to dive back into the world of Frank Miller's dystopian Gotham City and immerse yourself in the legendary tale of The Dark Knight Returns, because I think you'll find it's still a quintessential Batman story and one that unequivocally changed comic books forever. Hey everyone, thank you so much for watching today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please make sure to leave a like on this video and leave a comment down below as well. Let me know your thoughts on everything we talked about in today's video. I can't wait to hear what you have to say as always. If you're new to Owen Likes Comics, please make sure to hit the subscribe button and the notify bell so you don't miss out on any future videos. And if you enjoyed this and you want some more, there should be some other videos on screen right now that you might also enjoy. If you want to help support the channel and help me make more videos, you can do so by going over to patreon.com/OwenLikesComics, or if you just want some more of me, you can follow me on Twitter, Instagram and Blue Sky, just at Owen Likes Comics. But that's all for this video. Again, thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and hopefully I will see you next time. But until then, take care and keep reading.